It's been a most difficult past couple weeks. Right now we don't sleep or eat much, and there's a great loss in our life, as I guess as you could. I don't think only a parent that lost a child knows, and I wish no one to have to know that. But we're still right now trying to figure out how to move on, and then we're trying to find answers to what happened. So.
I know it's difficult, and I can't imagine what you are going through. I appreciate you guys so much for speaking to us. But I wanted to ask you to just give us a picture of what your son was like.
He was funny. He was hard-headed. He was stubborn. He was a teenager, and he liked to ride dirt bikes, play video games. Sports. He liked to be outside. So.
And Mr. Eric Bland, can you talk about exactly what happened here? I mean, an independent autopsy ordered by you all has found that Zachary was shot in the back. And so set the stage based off of what you know, what led to his killing?
Well, much of what we know has been found out through our own investigation. As we have said repeatedly in the press, very little has been shared with the public. Nothing really has been shared with us. The identity of the officer hasn't been shared. The circumstances around the supposed drug sting haven't been shared. We haven't been told whether there's been any body camera or dash cam footage, and certainly that hasn't been released. So we were left with trying to piece together what had happened, and we've from several witnesses and from an individual that actually shot some video that we've released to the press, we've learned that Zachary and his girlfriend, they were on a date, their first date, Tori Martin, first went to McDonald's for her to get an ice cream cone, and then he went to Hardee's to get a hamburger. Now, supposedly a confidential informant or somebody gave the police a tip that Tori was either going to buy some drugs or sell some drugs. Not Zachary. Zachary's name wasn't mentioned. And the police descended upon their car when they turned to the back of Hardee's to go through the drive-through and pinned basically the car in. And the officer who came from the exit side of Hardee's came out with his gun drawn, a .45 caliber. And then on the right side, on the passenger side, on Tori's side, an undercover police officer came with a gun drawn as well. And within a split second, 2 shots were fired. One that hit Zachary in his rear left shoulder and the other that hit him in his rear left chest. And the officer claimed that Zachary was driving at him and he had to shoot in order to protect himself. But the physics, the ballistics and the physics of the trajectory of the bullet and where it entered Zachary's body, bullets fly straight, they don't take left turns. He was behind Zachary, and under any reasonable interpretation of the events, he could not have feared that his life was in danger or he was going to suffer physical injury such that he had the right to use deadly force. There's very strict guidelines on when you can discharge weapons into automobiles that are moving, because if you hit the driver and incapacitate the driver and the car's in gear, the car becomes essentially a missile that can cause further damage. There was no gun in the car. There was no appreciable amount of money to be able to buy drugs. There was no appreciable amount of drugs other than what we're told may have been personal consumption drugs for Tori Morton. She was arrested and charged with a simple drug paraphernalia charge that you pay a ticket for. So this was a horribly drawn up wrong sting operation that went horribly wrong. And a 19-year-old who weighed 121 pounds and was unarmed is shot and dead, and these parents are left with no explanation.
It's really, it stuns me to even hear that. But when talking about the response, I guess, that these officers had to what at worst was an exchange for drugs, which is something that we know happens almost everywhere, every day. How typical is it for officers to respond with guns drawn like that?
It's really not that typical of most police departments. This police department has a policy for drug stops or drug interaction with people that they think are doing drugs or selling drugs, they draw their guns, which is an escalation of a situation that's dangerous to begin with. When you have a gun drawn, it creates a problem. There were many more reasonable things that this officer could have done than discharge his weapon. He could have holstered his weapon. He could have radioed for additional assistance if Zachary was driving away. He could have put out an APB. Remember, there was no arrest warrant. Nobody's life was at risk. There wasn't a weapon in the car. There was no Amber Alert. Nobody was being kidnapped, and there wasn't a ticking time bomb situation. So nothing was required for deadly force to be used.
And from what I understand, the officer didn't even include Zachary's killing in the initial police report?
No, that's what we hear. We have not seen the police report.
And so you mentioned already that the officer his name hasn't even been released. What is the next step for you in pushing for that? I mean, you can't even push for charges or anything until you know who's responsible.
Well, I mean, it's not a fair and balanced investigation in this, because certainly Zachary's past is being investigated. The state is trying to find out everything they can about Zachary when he was a juvenile. But the public doesn't have the same benefit with this officer who, if his name is published, anybody who's had interactions with him, whether they're good or bad, would be able to provide some relevant information. The public is being denied that. The family is being denied that. In fact, we know who the officer is, but we've been threatened that if we release the name of the officer, we will be criminally prosecuted.
That's incredible. I mean, but it seems like the inevitable next step in this case, compared to other ones that we hear around the country, is that the officer will eventually have to be exposed, I guess. But I hate asking this next question, because it seems like there's no way.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Continue.
The police chief actually made the most repugnant statement I've heard in these type of situations. He referred to his officer as a victim of attempted murder. And that's why he's not releasing the name, because he views his officer, who shot and killed an unarmed 19-year-old kid, as a victim of attempted murder, saying that Zachary looked at him in the eye and intended to run him down. Now, I tell you, I wasn't there, nobody was there, but if a plainclothes officer or a plainclothes person comes up to me with a .45 caliber, I may put my foot on the gas pedal. I'm not sure. Now, the evidence as submitted by Tory Morton said the car was standing still. But I'm not sure I'm going to sit there and let somebody come up to my car brandishing a .45 caliber in my face.
And as you said, the physics wouldn't even back up the claims that the officer has made in terms of him even fearing for his life if this claim of attempted murder is going to stand. Like you said, that independent autopsy that you guys had to push for seems to contradict everything that he said. But I want to go back to you, Paul and Angie, finally. I mean, what I started to say earlier was that it's hard to ask this question to you guys, looking at you and hearing about Zachary, but what would justice look like for you, if anything? I mean, I know it's impossible to even ask that at this point, but what do you guys want out of this?
I think the officer should be charged, and something has to answer for my son being gone. I mean, he's only 19 years old, and the rest of our life we're going to live with this, and we're never going to be able to celebrate anything again with Zach. And every celebration that does come up, it'll be tarnished somewhat because Zach's not with us.
There's victims everywhere here. The family will be pursuing civil rights litigation, the violation of Zach's civil rights. It's not just that Zach loses the rest of his life. These parents lose a piece of their rest of their lives, because like Paul said, every event has a little asterisk with it. Every event is just not quite the same and doesn't have the same luster or shine that it would have if the family was together.
Well, we appreciate you coming on to share a little piece of what you said you've lost, your son Zachary. The family of Zachary Hammond, Angie and Paul, and family attorney Eric Bland, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank
Thanks
you for
for
your
having
time.
us.
Thank you.